All right, what's up, guys?
Hey,
Jackson, Micah.
hello.
Hey,
Hey, guys. Well, hey, for all those joining us, I know we're running a little bit late, but we were figuring out just some of the technology here. Always a little bit challenging, but hey, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you sticking around. I know we're about 13 minutes behind schedule, but this will be action-packed, I am sure. So I'd like to welcome you to our first Dad Matters Google Hangout, and you're going to be interacting with a lot of the different guys here at Focus. All of us are dads, and thought we just since we're running behind, is kind of dive in. Let me introduce myself. I'm Roy Baldwin, and I'm a part of the Dad Matters bloggers. And let me introduce our guys that will be joining us today, as we're going to be talking about a new study out on swearing and cursing. And what a great topic for us to also start on, right? So let me go ahead and introduce. Let me start with I'll start with Jackson. And Jackson, go ahead and introduce yourself if you could.
Hey, sorry my lower thirds isn't working. Jackson Dunn, I'm the Director of Marriage here at Focus on the Family.
And Micah, how about you?
yeah, I'm Micah Sage. I'm the manager of our email marketing team, and I've got a 9-month-old, and I also have a 3-year-old at home, both girls.
Awesome. And Micah, thanks for joining us. How about you, Jake?
I'm Jake Roberson. I'm also a Dad Matters contributor. I've got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 4-week-old.
Awesome. And let me introduce also Mike and Danny Herta, who are kind of tag teaming over there. Go ahead and introduce yourself, guys. I think we might have lost Mike and Danny. Hopefully he'll be joining us soon. So just real quickly, so I'm actually a dad. I've got 3 kids myself. My oldest is 15. He actually had oral surgery today. He had 4 impacted wisdom teeth taken out. So that was an exciting dad time today. And then I have a 10 and 7-year-old as well. Before we get into our conversation, and what I love to do is just tell a little bit about Dad Matters. We've been around for about over a year now. A lot of different dads blogging about their experiences as just kind of being average day dads, the challenges, the joys of being a father, and loving on our kids, and approaching it from not just a fatherhood perspective, but how do we come alongside our wives, our spouses, but also how do we do well in our marriages? And it's kind of what we unpack on a regular basis through our blog. And so if you haven't checked it out, check it out. And I would love to see you join our community. One big thing that we do have coming out through the blog is starting on Sunday, June 1st, is we're doing a month-long series on how to talk with your kids about sex. And it's not just for those who are kind of going into those tween years, but we're tackling all the way from a newborn all the way through to when they graduate. What does that look like? How do you talk with your kids about sexuality? We've got a lot of great resources, and I'm just really excited about that coming out on Sunday. And it'll be a month-long series. And a lot of the guys you're interacting with today have contributed to that. So why don't we go ahead and dive right in? Is that all right, guys? Does that sound good?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yep.
All right. So one of the things that really triggered us doing this Google Hangout was a study that I just saw about a week ago that talked about how cursing is actually a kind of a healthy thing to do. And I was struck by, that. What are the implications for me as a dad? But also as a dad who, tries to be a follower of Christ each and every day and lives that out, and knowing that I'm very flawed and imperfect. And so I thought it would be a great thing to tee up for the rest of you guys is, what do you think about this? When you think of swearing and cursing, your own experiences, in your own journey as a dad, what's that look like? What do you think about how cursing could be a healthy thing? Who would like to jump at that?
Um, well, I think, Danny, could you give us a perspective as far as from your angle as a counselor? Um, can we say it's healthy, or is that kind of overstepping the case or overstating it?
Is Danny with us? Well, how about you guys? When you think about this, we know We know in Scripture, right? We know in Scripture it talks about, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. Only for those that are for edifying of others. What's that? What's the implications for that? Now, I'll be honest, right? We're imperfect. The study says that a lot of people, right? It's a normal part of being a human being that when we get stressed or we drop, we step on one of those dreaded Lego pieces, right? As we're walking through, when the kids didn't quite pick up their Lego pieces, typically we might have something of expressing a frustration. Well, what are your thoughts on this? Man, you guys are quiet. Come on now.
This is a conversation. Let's go. Come on.
Let's go. This is a conversation.
All right, so we're still not getting audio from Danny and Mike.
We're not.
But
well, let me start it off. So, when I remember growing up, we were talking about this the other day. When you look at, I'll tell you, about my dad. I love my dad. My dad was the best man, in my wedding, and so I have a great relationship with my father. But my dad reminds me so much of the dad in Christmas Story. He goes down working on the fence and on the furnace, and he's doing those kinds of things. And next thing you know, he gets frustrated, and there are words that come out, I'm sure, that he would love to kind of take back, and I just remember that. And I remember the first time I said a curse word, ivory soap, definitely had made its way from outside of my body to inside my mouth. When there were words that I should not have used. I remember growing up with that and understanding that my words have impact. But how about for you guys? What kind of stories do you have maybe growing up?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to the soap in the mouth. My mom used to get the liquid soap out nice and thick into her hand and just kind of shove it into my mouth. Just kind of remind me that I need to keep my words clean. So I can definitely relate to that.
Well, and for me, it's been one of those things like, we talked about before. There's child to young adult to husband to father, and the home I grew up in, my dad very much was a man of extremes before coming to Christ, and so the drinking, the drug, the swearing, all the stuff. So I grew up after they came to Christ where the pendulum swung extreme. So never heard a curse word, never anything like that. And so for all of living kind of in those extremes of having to wrestle with on my own of what do I think, and then there's a perspective of going from an adult to then to as a dad, what do I want my kids to say? And so it's something I've really had to wrestle with of,
right,
can it ever be okay? Well, if it's unwholesome talk, then it's not, but then what do I think about it? What do I say? What are the choices I make? But then I'm telling you, the filter of what do I want my kids to say and how do I want them to behave has really made me take a second look at that.
That's really good, Jackson. One of the things that when I was reading about the survey was the Dr. Richard Stevens, who's one of the research on it. This is what he stated in the article. He says some people think it's frivolous, but it's tapping into emotion which helps us better understand people. Besides, everybody swears. When asked about his favorite swear word, Stevens asked his younger daughter for her opinion. My daughter tells me I really like the F word, he said, chuckling. I do like to use that one. And I think it's to your point is there is, as a dad, I'm sure there are times when there are words that come out of our mouths that we would love to do beyond just swear words. There are probably times when our children need to be edified and we maybe drop the ball on encouraging them, or maybe we're too harsh with them with our words. I mean, I think our words have significance. I don't know if I ever want my child or my daughter to say, hey, what's your dad's favorite word or curse word? Oh, it's this word. That for me would be very challenging for me, because is that the kind of legacy that I want to leave my kids? So I think when I read that article, that was the thing that really struck me is, do I really want to teach that? Is that one of the things I want to be teaching my children to be able to do?
And then to your point there, as far as what we're teaching our kids and how we're handling our emotions, it kind of seems like the crux of what he's studying there is how we relieve this stress or this pain when we feel it, and are there healthier ways of doing that that not only help us relieve that pain, but also role model something better for our kids, teaching them how to deal with stress, because that's a reality. They're going to face a lot of things in life that are going to want to make them descend into cursing. Each of us has faced those own,
Right.
situations in our lives, and so what then can we turn on this and say, okay, so we need to recognize that we need to give ourselves an outlet, but what is a healthy outlet?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cussing tends to have a very interesting effect on people. It makes them feel like they have a lot of power. There's a lot of social acceptance to cussing, swearing. In the psychological field, some people find it kind of funny, the rants that some people go into with cussing, and they see it as kind of fun and funny, where it really exposes a person's heart. And we see that clearly in Scripture. It talks about people's hearts coming out in our words and coming outwardly in our expressions. And kids watch very carefully what we do, and then they model it. What cracks me up, actually, or actually not cracks me up, I'll say a better word for that would be what I get confused on sometimes when parents come in and they say, I don't know why my kid is cussing. I say some cuss words, but I tell them not to, and they should not do what I'm telling them not to do. And so then that's when I ask them, what is it that you're doing? You say those words, so how can you expect your child not to do those? And so maybe you need to start saying no to yourself first, and then you can say no to your child. There's also a perception of freedom. A lot of teenagers that love the cuss words and love to say that, they love the freedom felt by that. They feel like adults, and so it gives them a ticket to feel like, wow, I'm an adult now. I can say the F word, or I can say all these different words, and now nobody can tell me what to do or what not to do. Yet they get enslaved to those words. Anytime they're stressed, they have a hard time stopping themselves from saying them after they've done it for a long time.
Hey, Danny, it's great to have you guys finally get mic'd in and joining us. Danny's one of our counselors here, and Danny does a lot of interactions with a lot of our parents and teens calling into the ministry. So, Danny, we really appreciate you kind of joining in with us today. I think you make some really great insights that ultimately, right, as dads, we're really modeling for our kids what that is. In fact, there's a study that Lifeway did a few years ago when it talked about, this big alarming of, parents, kids walking away from the faith, teens walking away from the faith. 60%, and some studies had 90% of kids walking away from the faith. That was really outlandish. Because it was just for a season, it wasn't even that high. But one of the things that came out of a lot of that conversation was kids kind of walking away from the faith because of hypocrisy. Because my parents were saying one thing on Sunday, but living it out differently Saturday, kind of that Monday through Saturday. And that's really what you're talking about, is ultimately what are we modeling, I think, for our kids. I think what kind of outcomes do we want to have in our children? I think with my own kids, my 15-year-old boy, I want him to be a great husband. I want him to be a great dad someday. I know that when he's getting stressed or doing conflict, dropping F-bombs or other curse words is probably not the best way to resolve conflict or handle stress in his life. And so part of that is really teaching him the self-discipline. But culturally right now, that is kind of against the grain a little bit, I think, where it's just common. It's very common language. I can read an ESPN article or read an article anywhere, and there's curse words dropped all the time. So I think it's a little more acceptable today, and I think studies like that make it even probably more acceptable than it ever has been before.
Yeah, we have a 10-year-old foster daughter with us, and last night at dinner I asked her this question about cursing, and I said, is it a big deal? And she's like, eh. And I said, at school, how young are kids cursing? And she said, first grade. Which really kind of shocked me a little bit, but she doesn't think it's a big deal. I mean, she comes from a little bit rougher school.
Right.
Kids nowadays, they don't freak out when another kid says it. And she even said some of her teachers have used that language in the classroom, and they don't think it's a big deal.
Mike,
It's interesting.
Go ahead, Danny.
Roy, if I could just jump in.
Please.
Russia had actually said they banned cussing from the passed legislation to ban cussing from media. our media with the music the kids listen to, there's just so much in there with the words, and it really reinforces their emotions. So it goes right into the limbic system, the amygdala. It is tied into their emotional memory, and they begin to, it comes out when they become frustrated, when they're expressing that emotion
Right.
that the music has touched on. Yesterday, I'll just put in a real quick story. It was a 9-year-old kid that I was seeing in my practice, and the child said, my dad gets drunk a lot, and then he cusses all the time to us. And he said, I would love to just be able to say those cuss words right. It makes me want to say those cuss words to my dad. And sometimes big fights and altercations in families is a child being disrespectful with their words, cussing at their parent. And the parent says, hey, I want respect. And so I say, well, I wonder where they got those words and the use of that in conflict. Like what you said, Roy, conflict resolution using those words is usually not the best result.
No, that's yeah, Danny. Those are some great insights. I think to your point earlier that you're talking about that, and oftentimes we see this as right for especially kids, a way to express freedom. A way for me to become an adult. Well, as adults, then are we really modeling that cursing is a kind of a rite of passage then into adulthood? I would say no. I would say that's a very ineffective way to say, hey, now you're a man. Hey, good job. Good luck on dropping those f-bombs, and I'm sure that'll get you far in work and in your relationships. I think the reality is I think anyone who's, understands that it's not good, and how we handle our relationships. Hey, Mike, I had a question for you because you have you shared something interesting yesterday, Mike, when it comes to raising your own kids, but also with your foster kids. Can you I love what you shared yesterday. Can you share that with the group?
Sure. Yeah. We've been foster parents for 5 years, and we've had some rough kids come through who have a lot bigger fish to fry. So when they curse, we acknowledge it, but we don't scold it, because we're trying to work on one issue at a time. But then, kind of when things calm down, we pull them aside and say, "Hey, you can't use that language," because in the heat of the battle, that'll just get them to curse more. But we're trying to let them know, like, hey, it is a big deal. You shouldn't be using that language. But it's hard. We try and find that balance between the bigger issues that they're dealing with and then cursing.
Yeah, no,
because on the
that's
total
good.
pool, it's a little bit lower than the other issues.
Yeah, right. Because when you look at the full scope of what the challenges are that are before you, right? You've got to pick your battles wisely in relationships. And I think again, not that you're condoning that, but what I found interesting is really at the essence of what you're talking about is relationships. The importance of the relationship and what you're trying to do for that child and getting them to a place of greater health. And I think we probably could all identify that with all of our children, how unique they are. And ultimately, what kind of outcomes do we want to have for our kids in regards to the kind of husband, wife, productive coworker, having someone with good character and strong values? These are things that are truly important for us as a dad to really influence in our kids. And right, so you do. It's a constant. Every day we're picking our battles to say what ultimately is, and I think that ultimately helps us guide us through that. Would you guys agree? I think ultimately we want to, kind of have the end in mind, so to speak, when it comes to our children, to let us know the things that we need to do, not just to help our children, but I think even as dads who identify as Christ followers, to realize the Scripture is very clear that cursing isn't one of those things as an option for us in some ways. Is that we've got to find better ways to relate with our children, to express ourselves emotionally, handle conflict and stress in such a way that really does, in some ways, elevate us about where the rest of culture is going.
Yeah, and talking about relationship, talking about what we're role modeling, it's exactly that. We can tell our kids till we're blue in the face. We can, like our parents used to go with soap. We can do hot sauce. All these other legalistic hand-slapping techniques, but if we're not modeling that, then there's no context for them to understand why it's important. For me, I grew up with a dad where it just didn't happen. He didn't cuss, he didn't swear, and he was respectful of people. He was a kind person, and he was straightforward. He was, and so he just taught me by modeling. And talk through things as they came up, but it wasn't a heavy-handed, smack you if you say something wrong. It was living a life that I could look up to and understand that if I want to have success with a family, with business, wherever I am, that it takes a certain type of demeanor, a certain type of character, because even with the coursing of culture, nobody wants to hear you dropping f-bombs in an interview, and there's no better way to teach our kids that than to show them that with the way we live our daily lives.
No, that's
Yeah,
go ahead, Micah.
I was going to say, I can kind of relate to the modeling aspect. Fairly early, my daughter was just over a year old, and it was football season, and we were watching a football game, and like during a commercial break, my daughter started saying, "Go, go, go, go," because that's what I would yell when my team was running down the field. And luckily, I didn't say anything bad during the game, but at that time, I just realized that she's
Right.
seeing me as a model of what vocabulary am I using in general, so that from an early age, or at least her early age, I found it kind of really important to watch what I was saying, because I want to see her reflect the better parts of me rather than the not great parts of me. So yeah, it's definitely a modeling thing.
What's interesting is we have a couple developmental stages as kids that are important. I think they feed into this whole idea of the cussing. One is the mirror neurons that you guys are talking about, where we mirror one another, and that's how we learn. That's how birds learn to sing their songs, right? And that's how we as humans start to learn what it means to be a human. And so we're built in with mirror neurons. When we watch movies, we come out kicking like Karate Man or martial arts kung fu guy coming out of the movie theater as little kids, and that's because those mirror neurons are working. And so you're right when you say go, go, go or whatever. When you see your kids, sometimes they look like mini adults at certain times, and that's because they're mimicking what we're doing. And then what's interesting, at about 11, 12, 13, there's this stage of risk-taking that the brain has to go through, a shifting to being okay with risk-taking. And before that, there's a lot of fear, but then that risk-taking can turn deviant if there is no relationship or very little relationship between the kids and the parent. And so part of that deviance would be the swearing, because if it's not allowed in the home and there isn't much relationship, that's when you see it really exponentially grow, because they're wanting to define who they are. And there's this the risk-taking, which is necessary for us to be able to leave the nest at 18, starts to unfold, and then it's a shock to parents, and then the parents don't know what to do. And it really goes back to having a relationship, but also the modeling that is needed when there's stress or when there's conflict. And that's what you guys have been talking all along about.
Yeah.
Hey, Danny, that's great. Now, hey, Jackson, you've been awfully quiet. What are some of the implications when you think? I know you do a lot of stuff around counseling for couples, a lot of premarital stuff. What are some of the implications from a marriage perspective? With this topic we're talking about.
Yeah, great stuff being shared, guys. I think the thing for me, and as important of an issue as this is, it makes me think of all the work we did on the talk. And how it forced me to look at what I just call the end game. What's my end game for my kids? For me, it's their heart. I mean, and translate into marriage. If I've got 20 minutes with someone stuck, I'm going after their heart, right? The importance of the heart. Guard it, it's a wellspring of life. You love deeply from the heart. As a man in his heart plans his ways, but God directs his steps. I mean, just the heart is so central to who we are. And I think without the proper coping mechanisms, without the proper way to deal with conflict and stress and crisis, if we're taking that out on our kids, we're taking that out on our spouse, whatever it is, as Danny was talking about, the separation that is there, not only almost devaluing others, the tongue has a power of life and death, but if we're not careful what we're saying, how we're saying it, what's the heart behind it, the tone, the body language, all the things that come, whatever we say, I mean, yeah, it can be considered an American version of a cuss word, or it can be a word that has the same intent. And if our spouse knows that, or if they know why we're coming at them with a certain thing, to me, as important as a word is, as important as a talk is about sex, whatever that it is, what's below the surface of that? Is my heart aligned with God? Is my heart pure? Are my hands clean? Is my intent to build up and to strengthen and to help grow? Again, whether spouse or child. So for me, it's just really forcing me. And I'm telling you, dude, the funny thing is, guys, like right before I was walking in here to get all ready, my wife sends me a text and says, "Hey, the tire's flat. You got to come get me because we got to go get the kids." I would like to say that I just had all kinds of positive words flow through my head when she said our tire was flat. So it's ironic to me that I had to wrestle with it on the way in here. And then how do I treat her when I get there? And I'm running and she's running. So again, for me, Roy, it's really whether I'm thinking about my two little boys that are 6 and 5, my wife who will celebrate 11 years here in a few days. What is my heart? What are my intentions behind what I'm saying, what I'm doing, what I'm not doing, what I'm not saying? And it's really convicted me, whether it be with the cussing thing or with, as we talked about, the talk and those types of things. So that's really where it goes for me.
You know, Mike, Jackson, I think one of the things that struck, right, when you talk about the intent of the heart, I mean, there are times when I'm in conflict, if I'm having an argument with my wife, if I roll my eyes, that is like dropping an F-bomb. You know what I mean? I think it is what is the intent of my response to what her need is. And at the end of the day, if I'm not really helping address what she's expressing to me and I can help fuel that fire, you're right. At the end of the day, if my heart's not in the right place, I'm not going to respond in the right ways at the right times to really help maybe even de-escalate a situation versus escalate a situation. So I think you made some great points there.
Well, and think about it. I think, Danny, it was you said. I mean, you know, a lot of times what we're saying is going to reflect what's on the inside. For me, what we're doing, where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. What we value, right, is what we give ourselves to, and for those things to be coming out. And I've found when I get extra frustrated with my kids, or I want to say the words we're talking about to them or to my wife, for me it's those bells ringing of, okay, what's going on deeper beyond this? I know I want to say this, and I think this is going to make me feel better or solve the issue, but I think it also gives us an element of, like you're saying, rolling your eyes. Dude, why would I ever do that? I can't believe I did that. Well, it's reflecting something else that's going on. And so I think
I agree.
Give us a good little warning sign, the good little light that pops on the car that says check engine, whatever that it is. It gives us an opportunity to really dig into where we should be focused on.
That's good. Hey guys, I know we said about 30 minutes, and we're getting close to that. What advice? And Danny, I guess I'll throw this to you first, Danny, and maybe the rest of you can throw in. But what advice would you give to a dad who maybe really, or even a parent, a mom? What advice would you give them if they're just, when they get frustrated, they're dropping, curse words? What advice would you give? What advice would you give them?
Actually, I get to work with that a bit in my practice. So I'd say bottom line, we're decision makers. That was the freedom we were given from the beginning. We make our own decisions, and emotions try to sway us away from our decisions, and they'll pull up like a Lamborghini pulling up and asking you if you want to get in and go for a ride. But if you go on a ride with many emotions, it's a wild ride, and you go far away from decision making. Emotions were there to enhance our experiences and to give us warning signs, as Jackson was telling us, but not to lead our lives. And once they get in the driver's seat, all kinds of things can come out, including cuss words or all kinds of other things that can happen. Perceptions and other things, belief systems can also sway our decision making, but emotions are the most loud and most powerful, and they're the fastest. They come in and they roar and they want your attention. And so remember, each of us are decision makers. We live by that, and we need to be ready for what's around that. And many times we feel uncomfortable or insecure around a bunch of people that do cuss, where there's a norm, and we feel the need to do that so that we fit in. And that's not true. We're each decision makers individually, and that's respected. What's not respected is when you're driven by your emotions wherever you go.
Yeah, Danny, that's great. That's awesome. Hey, do you have any time? Maybe you could help me counsel through some things. Man, that's really good. Because you're right, our emotions can really overweigh at times just our even our rational thinking. It can quickly override good decision making. So that's a great great thought. How about the rest of you? Any other advice you might give a dad or a mom?
I would say if you do it, don't beat yourself up. I like the phrase "do the next right thing."
Hmm.
So say the next right thing. Like, don't dwell on, oh, I can't believe I just said a bad word. Move on, and just make a promise. Like, hey, I'm not going to do that again.
That's good, right? So creating a culture of forgiveness or saying you're sorry. I mean, that ultimately, right, should be a foundation of our home anyways, but you're right. It's kind of owning that stuff when we do fall short because, right, we are very imperfect. Because we're not talking about being perfect dads or moms in this situation. We're just talking about learning to control ourselves in ways that ultimately we're building the right things in our kids. So that's a great point, Mike.
And I
Jake,
think,
you going to say something?
oh, well, I'll say real quick thing. I think building on that, Mike, I think for me I've really been wrestling with because I'm a perfectionist by nature, and I'm so trying to work through that and not let that take over my kids' lives like it took over mine for so long. Like, I'm trying to make sure they're okay with being frustrated. Like, it's okay to be frustrated with me. It's okay to be frustrated with your mom, with your brother. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be stressed. It's okay to be overwhelmed. Whatever that it is, I'm just so working on how can I make sure they know it's okay to be frustrated, exasperated, whatever. But as a parent, in guiding them, modeling, mentoring them, discipling them, what are the best ways? It's okay to mess up. So, Mike, great reminder. What are the best ways to deal with frustration, exasperation, anger, those types of things? And so, for me, I don't want to dismiss. I don't want them to make they're walking around on eggshells that they've got to be perfect. But again, I think the part of the thing is what are the healthiest ways that they can deal with that, starting with me, modeling with me, so that they don't think my favorite word in the world is the F-bomb. So that's a nice goal, but moving beyond that of maybe helping them understand better ways to deal with that.
And that's
What's interesting there, Jackson, is that we were actually talking about this morning as counselors. That what is perfection? 2 Corinthians 13 actually talks about perfection, and perfection in that interpretation is a state of constant repair. And we know that Jesus brought the idea of reconciliation to the forefront through the death on the cross, and through that we brought perfection. And so perfection is being able to reconcile, being able to repair, and that decision making is observing something that's taking place, observing frustration, and letting it be there and writing it out because it will eventually go, and figuring out where it has come from, but not letting it pull you or tug you away from where your heart is really to be. So yeah, that makes sense.
Good. Cool.
Yeah, that's excellent. So in some ways, right, not just making our homes a physically safe place, Jackson, right, and Danny, but also making sure it's an emotionally safe place. It is a place to process life. It's a place to strengthen our relationships, but ultimately it's ultimately inviting God and Christ into that conversation to help transform us. And I think it's a great point of really not wanting these perfect kids who always respond perfectly in every situation, but it is trying to get to a place where ultimately, how does this draw us closer together as a family? That's a great point.
And I think what Mike said, like to your point you made with your foster kids, I think day to day, minute to minute, hours to hours, majoring on the major and minoring on the minors. Is the word the major thing right now, or is the major thing of what's going? I think it's just trying to get better discernment on those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Any other thoughts on this last question? Micah, Jake?
No, I think you guys covered it.
Yeah. So how about for that parent maybe who's struggling with a kid right now who is just kind of really coarse with their language? What kind of advice would you give, Danny? I mean, we talked about the parent maybe struggling with this, but what if you're a parent just really frustrated right now with your child who's not handling stress very well, whether that's they're using curse words or they're just becoming very aggressive in their behavior? What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a great question. There are good books out there for parents to read. One of them that I like is A Whole Brain Child by Daniel Siegel. There's also Emotional Intelligence by Goleman. But I would say that parents need to set goals with the children and see what they're wanting to do. Because if it's just parents telling them not to do it, it's like me telling you not to listen to the clock. You're going to end up doing it because you become over focused on that. We need to train the child to do is really become focused on what they want to do and who they want to become, and then make short steps towards that. And so I like to use some types of celebrations, and one common one I use is either rocks or marbles that you put in a jar, and each time the family is meeting the goals, maybe it's respect, and that would include good language in the home. Then let's put marbles in the jar. If you're seeing mom and dad respect each other, hey, let's put marbles. Once that's filled, then let's go out and celebrate. That's when we go out to a restaurant. That's when we go out to a movie together.
That's great.
And that's our ticket to go, because we're doing what we need to do, our work at home, so that we can go out and have fun and celebrate together. And so setting goals so that you see success. And then when a kid is just really having a hard time, really helping them figure out what emotion drove that. You know, what are you trying to communicate? Well, I'm trying to communicate frustration, or I wanted to be cool, or I'm angry. Okay, well that's a good angry. When you say I'm angry, what other ways can you express it? What's your toolbox here? What menu of things? What are other ways you could express that? And then problem solving with them, and then helping them be successful. And when a child is really disrespectful with their language, I talk to parents about a reminder. What if you do that marble system or the rock system? Maybe what you could do is they get to clean the toilets of the home. And then just a reminder, it's wasteful. That kind of speech and disrespect is wasteful. They clean the toilets, then they come back, and you're back in the system. There has to be somewhere a line or a boundary that they're familiar with. That has some tie-in with the story that you're trying, or the value you're trying to instill in your home. So with the toilets, a lot of kids say, Mr. Huerta, I don't want to clean any more toilets, and but it really resonates in their mind. They get it. We want to flush this out of our home. We really do. And that's when you've gotten the child on board, when you have a good relationship, when you've set the goals. Then they're on board with that, and they don't like it, but they do it, and they get back on the system, and it really tends to work very well.
Yeah, Danny, that's great. It's such a great response. And it really is about, ultimately, I think, going back to so much, just trying to sum up of our conversations. I think you talk about some really practical, tangible ways, but that really does then help flesh out the intent, the safety in our home, the relationship building that we want to do, but ultimately building in some consequences there, or even some self-discipline about helping our kids process their emotions properly. And that's just some great advice. Hey guys, I know we're over time, but I just want to thank each of you guys for helping be a part of this. Danny and Mike, Jackson, Jake, and Micah. I just so appreciate you guys being a part of this. Hey, for those of you who've turned in, we'd love your feedback, what you liked, what you didn't like. Maybe some things that we could tackle in the future about, things that we could impacting not just dads but moms, and what's that look like in your home. We'd love your feedback and your your thoughts on maybe future topics. And then also, don't forget, this Sunday we're launching The Talk. We're going to have a lot of great resources and conversations around that, and we're very excited about that. And don't be afraid to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. And again, I appreciate the guys. And hey, I just wanted to show you a great example where I got it right this week. So my daughter came running up to me the other day, yesterday, and said, "Hey, Dad," and she jumped up in my arms, and I dropped my phone, and she kept saying, "Dad, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And I said, it was just one of those moments where it's like, it's okay. It was an accident. I'll find a way to figure it out, but it still works. So, but that was a good opportunity to use my conflict stress skills just yesterday. Well, anyways, hey guys, thank you again, and thanks so much. And hey, we'll be doing these again soon, so keep an eye out. And thanks again for joining us.
All right, thanks guys.
We'll learn something Sunday.